All right. Joy Revolution podcast with your boy, Mark Cordone. Usually I would say something like this right now. If you don't know me, I get to serve people who are creating these revolutions of joy using creativity and an elevated sense of happiness. I won't say that today. Why? Because that could quite possibly be a label. So what I would say is I am happy. I'm joyous. I'm a little bit anxious, and I am ready to go to have this conversation with the guest that I have on today, right? Listen to this. This person has a speech degree with a minor in radio and television. Not only that, but she is coaching when it comes to public speaking. She also is an admissions counselor at the Socratic Experience Global Online School. I just destroyed that. You know why? Because I'm nervous. Because this person's going to pick me apart in the way that I present myself speaking-wise. Tiffany Edith, what's going on? What are you doing here?
Oh, thank you so much. I found you through some wonderful friends. I'm looking forward to
Yeah.
jumping in. And I have gotten some feedback because the topic of my upcoming TEDx is about labels. And I've been very pleased that people are catching themselves, or they're like, did I just use one? I have to go back and check. And I love that because I've been doing the same thing. I'm definitely preaching to myself. I'm talking to the mirror when I cover this
Yeah.
topic. And I'd like it to stop there, though. I mean, sure, do I want to become more aware? Do I want to help other people who want to be more aware become more aware? Yes,
Yeah.
and that's the feedback I'm getting from you. Apart from that, I'm not judging. There's no tally.
Lies. Lies. I tried to sabotage this meeting today by breaking my microphone. No, not at all. But I just wanted to start with this. When I saw that you were going to talk about labels, I thought to myself, okay, what is the definition there? The first thing that came to mind was, okay, maybe it's a psychosocial thing in which we will either generalize or categorize folks in order to either understand them or to, to connect with someone even better. And so when you talk about what labels are, how do you define that?
Of course, think tangibly, and I'm looking around, I can see labels all over my house. We're always going to be
Yeah.
using physical labels. And so mentally, of course, it's a natural shift. I'm going to label this person dangerous, this person creepy, right? Part of this is to protect us,
Yeah.
right? And we do have to recognize that we're always going to be dealing with these terms. That's great. Keep that. But there's another time that actually gets in the way of understanding ourselves and understanding others. And that is the
Right.
differentiation. It's a nuance, it's a subtlety that I want us to learn.
Yeah.
And when I attribute to another human being an idea or a word that limits their hope and their agency, that's a label.
Got
That's
it.
a label, right? So, like diagnoses could be
Mm-hmm.
a gift. Like, I've been wondering my whole life what's wrong with me, and that we've been doing tests, and finally I got a diagnosis, and everything makes sense. And you're like, oh, but that could be a label. It could actually, if someone
Yeah.
is like, ooh, this is what you are. You'll always be that, and it's going to limit you, and it's gonna put you in a box, right? And so it can
Yeah.
shift. The same word can shift. It can give you the empowered feeling that you need, or it can be used to keep you alienated. It's it's
I
what we're
got it. Right when you said agency, oh, that's the difference, And the follow-up questions that I had were, what's the difference between a label and a stigma? What's the difference between a label and a stereotype? It feels like you kind of have talked about that, but take that a little bit further.
Yes, the difference between a label and a diagnosis.
Mm.
And so if anything that adds to my identity, that gives me a sense of power, a sense of hope, a sense of energy,
Yeah.
I can wear that proudly. It might be unique. I might be put in a group of others and other people judge me for that, but I don't care because I'm claiming it and I'm naming it proudly. But a subculture or a tone or a manipulator can take the same exact word and try to nail you to the wall and try to pin you, and cubbyhole you.
Mm.
And you can have that same label 30 seconds apart from the same person in the same conversation. It's a lifelong achievement for me to
Got it.
know when that toggles, when something, I might call myself a certain gender or a certain nationality, right? And I'm proud and I'm strong. 20 seconds later, when somebody's alienating me or I'm feeling inferior, same thing, boom. It puts me off kilter.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we can just notice when that's happening, we can find our true selves, we can be articulate, we can bounce back. We can say, "Why did this air in the room just shift?" Cuz I worked hard to get here and I told people this is who I was, and all of a sudden I feel like I'm being insulted. And that's,
Yeah.
yeah, that it has to do with that hope and that agency and listening.
It is yeah, it is super subtle, and I'm thinking about when, I'm thinking about when I was younger and now I realize that there was a lot of labels thrown my way when I was younger, and I remember many times where something would come up, right? I'd be doing my thing, kind of lived in my own world when I was a kid, right? And I remember a few people saying, "Oh, don't mind him. He has an active imagination." And I was like, cool, I've got an active imagination. But also, like, as I was growing, as I grew older, like, I remember not wanting to be creative because I just didn't want to. But like, when I started thinking about those things, being creative, wanting to put things out, 40-year-olds don't do that kind of stuff anymore. I need to grow up. And so I'm just even thinking about the labels that were assigned to me or unconsciously assigned to me. I'm also thinking about there was a time when I wanted to be Michael Jackson, right? Right. And so I want, right? Exactly. And I remember at the time I didn't see anyone who looked like who wanted to be Michael Jackson who looked like me, right? And there's this Time magazine article that came out that was like a bunch of like Asian American kids, and it was like those Asian American whiz kids. They had them like with book bags on, apple for the teacher and stuff like that. And I remember the label of, okay, is if that's what an Asian American is, well, that's where I'm going to fall into. That's what society shows. That's what's on the cover of magazines. Maybe it's not a great idea to be Michael Jackson. And so I'm thinking about things that those labels that come off as these sort of benevolent labels. But for me, if you label yourself as one thing, then it might take away, like you were talking about, having agency in another thing. And I could see that being very paralyzing, no matter what the label is or the stigma is or the stereotype is. Have you felt like you've come across similar things? You want to be Michael Jackson like me.
Yes. I mean, as a kid, I wanted to be an astronaut. I wanted to be in the police force. I wanted to be an architect. I'm sorry,
Mhm.
not astronaut, architect. And I wanted to be on Broadway.
There you
Every
go.
week change to something different. You're like, what does being a police officer have anything to do with Broadway? And then I wanted to be a mechanic. I wanted to be a mechanic. And that was just my way of being in love with everything around me. Like a
Yeah.
polymath. Like, oh, they juggle. I want to juggle. Ooh, they high dive. I want to high dive. And
Yeah.
so we do this even as adults. We try on things. We imagine what it would be like to live that life that we see, on Sesame Street. It might be the baker or the mailman. In real life, it's more like a consultant and an entrepreneur. Very hard to portray. When you were saying that creative imagination, people
Yeah.
were saying that while they were dismissing you. Oh, he has a creative
Yep.
imagination, like The Secret Life of Walter Mitty. And
Yep.
all of a sudden that's a negative. And then if you see
Yeah.
your people on Time Magazine, like, oh, those whiz kids, maybe it'll just be easier if I just join the stream and be in one of those stereotypes, right? And there are times when it is easier, and there are times when you are being
Yeah.
dismissed. And so it's that it's this idea of, and your original question, if you don't mind repeating it, because I wanted to ramp up to
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. I think it was just a follow up on like you seeing these things popping up in your own timeline, as you were growing up, just like as Mark was growing up, Tiffany, how have you seen those things show up for you? And maybe that you didn't even notice them showing up, when they did, and it's maybe a reflection back on that, because I do want to get to that story behind, like, what were the things that started showing up for you, because obviously those labels are subtle, and so to be able to like look back, right?
Right. Quite a few labels probably flew past my ears. They probably would have alerted other people, but I don't know why I missed many labels, but there's one I didn't miss because of the repetition.
Mhm.
The repetition, I finally got it through my thick skull. And I can't tell you how many times I'd been called a tomboy. And that was inherited. I didn't call myself a tomboy. I just heard people in my family, people in my greater neighborhood calling me this. And they were always saying I was a tomboy when I was having a really good time.
Okay.
I was really enjoying myself, being authentic. And so I was like, okay, I'm a tomboy. If you say so, that's fine with me. And so then I started announcing myself a tomboy. It became my identity, my secret little name
Nice.
tag.
Yep.
And because I had to get what the label of a tomboy was from other people, I
Mm.
kind of played into their expectation of me. I there's so many psychological factors to it, but eventually I got old enough to realize that being a tomboy was something you could do up to a point, and there was an
Yes.
expiration on it. So wasn't it cute when you were 7 or 8? But at some point they would get annoyed, like, oh, will you please act differently and stop being a tomboy? I thought tomboy was the key to my success, but as I
Hmm.
got older and became a woman and entered the adult world, being a tomboy was not an advantage at all. And I realized
Hmm.
that this dynamic of male, female, and girls who act this way and what boys and men really do,
Yeah, gender roles.
yes, I I realized it was unspoken because there were a lot of smiles. Like you'd say, how come I can't be the leader in this organization?
Mm.
And they'd give you these big smiles and they'd tell you why. They always had a reason why.
Yeah.
And I would give them the benefit of the doubt. But then I realized that tomboy is not going to get me into equality. And so it's hard to look yourself in the mirror and admit that you've been in a subculture and it's in the air. It's a lot to chew off. It takes a lot of energy. And so I just postponed it. Okay, well I grew out of that, right? Don't have to think about it ever again. People aren't calling me a tomboy anymore. I'm not climbing trees anymore. But I had a daughter. I can postpone understanding trauma or understanding my background or thinking deeply about my emotions. I will. I'd rather be
Hmm.
doing other things.
Yeah.
I'd rather go dancing and play dodgeball. But
Oh.
but when I had a daughter,
Yep.
I realized I cannot keep postponing these issues because I don't want her to inherit things or be stuck with the same labels that I know that I have no way of dealing with. And so I finally said, okay, fine, I'll do it for her. I'll really sit with my background and with my
Hmm.
upbringing and think, what was it that made me feel inferior? Because that's really what happened eventually. I thought, okay, I'm just walking in the shadow of toms and boys who obviously have the right to be able to climb trees and go fishing without some kind of a label for doing so. And so because my daughter came along, I finally faced the music. And
So
it
what did
took,
that look like?
yeah, it was a willingness
Hmm.
to admit that there was something about my childhood I didn't like. And there was a willingness that a lot of it confused me. And so I'm just going to have to think it through, write it down, journal it out. What was that icky feeling I get? Why do I feel insufficient and
Yeah.
inferior? Knowing that every Disney princess will tell me to be true to your heart. I got the messages. I had great heroes and women who were strong and powerful, but it wasn't translating into my heart because I was still feeling inferior.
Wow.
So, right. I mean, I knew there was a huge chasm between those people who were confident and self-assured and had full agency and me.
Yeah.
And nobody really knew that, so it wasn't bothering anybody else. I could postpone it forever.
Yeah.
But once I didn't want it to bother my daughter, I tried to open that can of worms, that Pandora's box, and I never went back. It's true. And I had to work through it. It took me a couple years. When I'm talking about it in a TEDx, it sounds like it happened in 10 seconds.
Right.
Yeah, it took a long time. And then I admitted to my daughter that I was afraid. I was sad that she was a girl, which is tough to be vulnerable and sincere about.
Oh, you straight up said that. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know how old she was, but I said I was afraid to have you. I had fears.
Okay.
And it
Got
was
it.
because I assumed that she would be like me, and I assumed that the world was still the same. So I was anxious. And of course, the world is so different. Her existence is a whole new thing, and she's
Yeah.
nothing like me.
Sure.
uh, yeah, in a lot of ways, she's nothing like me. So it was false fear, but she also spoke into my life, and she had the ability to hear when someone was calling her a label. And so eventually I started watching her shun labels and live in her agency and live in her hope and her energy. And I sometimes I follow her, sometimes she follows me, and that's the way I hope it will be between you and I and anyone hearing this, because you and I, anybody can fall off the wagon at any time. We all have
Yeah.
our chinks in our armor. We all have our insecurities, and there's like that one label that just ooh, and
Right.
it affects us and nobody else. But it'll happen. I promise. It'll happen again. It'll happen to you and I. It's
I
coming.
feel like the story that you just told was eerily similar to the me wanting to be like Michael Jackson sort of thing, right? And now I know that you were married for a pretty, for a good amount of time.
Yeah.
Was there also working with the labels that was coming from your husband at the time for your daughter? Like, was that something that the whole family was working on together?
No, it was
Okay.
really in my past. Yeah. There were probably separate, different labels there,
Uh-huh.
but thankfully, thankfully, I had gotten out of that subculture. So I mentioned that in the TEDx too. Once you're in like a closed system or a vacuum, whether it's the office or the
Yeah.
faith community, yeah, or your
Hmm.
intrinsic family or your nuclear family,
Yeah.
excuse me, that's it actually becomes, yeah, there's no other word for it than subculture. And so this, I want our listeners to hear, if they're having influence in a classroom or in a meeting or at a job, make sure that you're not creating this easy way for other people, partition off other people, and instead of addressing an issue or an idea, starting to portion people off. Well, that's they're doing that because it's them. You know what I'm saying?
Wow.
Yeah, they always do that, don't they? And that's what it is. It's an implied and an inferred label, because we are very good at getting, now that we're mature, we can say labels without saying them.
I was like, speak for yourself. Like, I see, I get I'm picking up what you're
Yeah,
throwing
you
down.
won't get a sound bite that we think that that guy over there is an idiot, but you'll get all the implications, and you'll be inferred that we don't trust her. She's an outsider and he doesn't know what he's talking about. I don't have to say that without just raising an eyebrow and implying it. Yeah.
That totally makes sense in terms of like micro expressions that folks would throw out there, or even the distance that someone would be away from another person. That makes a lot of sense. And how much there's something very dangerous about that in terms of just those implied labels that we put on folks. I am curious about this. I can't stand in your shoes, but I wonder. I fit like when I think of certain things, like when I was growing up, being a divorcee would be like, oh, that person is their life is over. They're not never going to get married. You know what I mean? And is that a label that you ever took on? And did you ever feel anyone being like, oh, you're different now that you're a divorcee? And I think the next level would be a widower, right? Oh, she's never going to have a life after losing the husband's, right? So let's scale it back a little bit.
Sure.
But that idea of like a label, like a divorcee, is that something that you came across?
I was judgmental myself, and when I saw people divorced, I thought, huh, they couldn't, they obviously don't have the longevity or the grit, right?
Wow, Tiffany.
Oh yeah, I thought that. I've thought terrible things. I thought it's too bad that they couldn't figure out how to have
Yeah,
good communication.
yeah.
I thought maybe they didn't have the resources, and I thought that they couldn't hack it, right? And or maybe I thought, well, somebody must have done a huge bad thing, like an addiction or a crime.
Yep.
So when I heard divorcee, I have a little sad pluck on the heart. Like I'm glad I'm married 20 years.
Hey, now look at the spice there.
It's terrible. That's full disclosure. And now I'm realizing that the divorce rate is what, 51%. So they're like more people are divorced than aren't in
Yeah,
America. I know it fluctuates. Now I'm realizing that aside from the people who might have committed a crime or just done egregious things,
sure.
there were probably a really good amount of people who set a boundary and stuck to it.
Completely.
And if you set a
Completely.
boundary, you're going to lose relationships. And that's why we don't set boundaries. You're like, ooh, but I want to keep this boyfriend. Oh, but I just don't want to go through a divorce. It'll be such a pain. So I'll stay here longer and be labeled and ignore my emotions and not sit and have no radical acceptance
Mm,
and become less of myself because I need to keep an image up. So it took me too long, but I've definitely switched to I want to know where you are and how you're doing because everyone has their unique story for divorce.
mm,
And I do want to what I want to do for my daughter now and my listeners is just
mm.
keep the bit of curiosity and wonder alive.
Yeah,
If somebody's coming to you talking bad about the boss or giving it a label, a blatant label, stay curious. Be like, okay, that's your opinion, but
yeah.
I want to know why they got fired. I want to know why you would be indicating to me that they're not good at their job. And all we have to do is stay curious about, and I like to say about an emotion, because
Hmm.
I don't want to be super fragile that my emotions lead me. And if I'm not in the mood to do hard things, I don't do hard things. The emotions I believe are trying to protect me and they are signals. And if I can hang and if I can follow that signal, it'll lead me to something solid, something with agency, something with power. But I have to go through across that rickety hanging bridge to get there. So
Completely.
I want to become stronger so that when I'm in a situation again, I know it'll happen, where I'm being labeled blatantly or I'm being alienated by the cool kid group at the lunch table. Nothing's fundamentally changed since we were kids.
Right.
I want to be able to say, "Oh, that's a label. I get it, and I know what to do about it." I'm going to
Yeah.
check I'm going to check in with myself, and now I can make a wise decision as to whether or not I'm going to continue a relationship with these people or this company.
This is serious shit that you're going to be talking about at TEDxOcala. So, with that said, anything you want to say before we go into the radical acceptance, my friend? Okay.
The labels are dangerous because they hit our identity,
Yeah.
and the identity is the foundation with which we interact with the world. That's when you might wonder, how come you can receive all of this flack and be called all these names, and it's like water off a duck's back because it didn't hit their identity. But every once in a while, one wiggles its way
Yes.
in, right?
Yes.
And it plants the seed, and you're like, ah, now it's my identity. And you never know what it's going to be. You might think, oh, that's so stupid. I should know better. Not a matter of weakness or intelligence
Yeah.
or wealth or anything. It just it got through and became an identity. And I wish we could like hold it at arm's length and say, that's my subculture. They're
Mm.
doing that because that's the only language they have. They can't even think past, they have no category for somebody who's unique
Yeah.
or somebody who's special. And so it's like a red flag. Think about a subculture. Think about whether or not it's hitting your identity, and then think about whether or not it's expired. Sure, I used to call myself all kinds of things, but that was me 5 years ago, 10 years ago. And I
Right.
run into people from the past and I have to get them up to speed. And every day I have to get myself up to speed. I want to be different the next 5 years.
Yeah.
So I better be having these labels on a carousel or, not very sticky. Like,
When you were talking, one of the first things that I was thinking about was, how can I do this without looking down on people? Like, oh, I dismiss you and I look down on your opinion, you know? And I think that's one of the first things is sort of being like, looking up or down at folks. It's very hard, I think, in doing this work, me thinking about it, to not look down on somebody. How can you reframe this or change my perspective on that so it's not something that I think about? Or maybe
we
it's something I have to do in the beginning.
Well, we're comparative creatures. We
Okay.
compare cars, we compare houses, right? We compare benefits at a job, and we compare each other. And
Yeah.
so when we're labeling, we're intentionally trying to say, I'm better than you, because it feels good. If we're insecure,
So good.
yeah. And the more insecure we are, the more we want to compare ourselves and come out on the top. right? And so if we can, it's like a quick fix. It's like instant gratification. Oh, you got a divorce? Well, I've been married 20 years, you know, right? Fill in the blanks. And I've been there, right? And I've also been very humbled. And the labels themselves should have an expiration date. So maybe if I am labeling somebody something, I have to create space that my label might have an expiration date. I might see my daughter as an elementary school kid. Well, when she becomes a teenager, I've got to switch. I've got to be treating her differently. So
Wow, Tiffany. Yeah.
my label for her needs was useful, right?
Hmm.
But now I've got to change it because she's changing. And so if you do catch yourself labeling somebody, just acknowledge, own it, and
Yeah.
say, my label will have an expiration date. All of my labels will always have an expiration date. I have to maintain curiosity to let this person that maybe I think I know, they're never going to change. I've gotten used to them. I can predict them. I might have to stay curious and let them surprise me and let
Mm.
myself be surprised.
It, re- it reminds me of a Nishi quote in which I'm paraphrasing right now, but they will accept you for everything you are until you grow wings, right? And then they clip the wings, you know. And the fact, like oh, look at that, goosebumps, homie. Like the fact that labels could be created to, you know, like like demean another person is just completely freeing. And for me, in terms of doing the work could be, okay, I'm labeling this person. Why? Because I'm intimidated by them.
Yes.
Because I'm jealous of what they have.
Yeah, just acknowledge that you're jealous because it's going to happen. It's
Yeah.
always going to happen. And I was sending a quote to my friend the other day too. I'll have to look up, maybe we can put it in the comments.
Yeah.
But basically, when you're a success, they're going to be like, "Oh, you got lucky," or "Oh, you were born that way," or uh, and they'll do everything but like acknowledge that it took you a very long time and it took a lot of hard work and a lot of failure. And so even if you're successful and you're blessing them and you're an example to them, they'll attribute your journey, right? Like we don't just label the people, we label the situation. Yeah, we label our emotions. If we don't study emotions, we can think that we're being jealous when we're actually being full of admiration, or vice versa.
Mm. Wow.
There's like Brene Brown says there's 87 emotions. I can name about five quick out of my head, but that just tells me I've got to keep studying these emotions
Yeah.
so I have all 87 memorized because I want to live in the world of 87 emotions. I do not want to live in the world of 87 labels.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. Let's talk about radical acceptance. I believe that's what you call it,
Hmm.
radical acceptance. That leapt off the page when I was preparing for this conversation. Why not just acceptance? Like what does that go?
Because it hurts so bad. It feels
Yeah.
so violent. I
Yeah.
have to look myself in the mirror and be like, I am down and out right now. I thought I would be at a certain place at this time in my life with this relationship, and it didn't happen. And I can numb it, I can deny it, I can hide it, or
Mm.
I can admit, guess what? I here at this point in my life, I thought I would be the opposite, and now I'm back to square one. I'm starting over. And I don't like starting over because it's impossible to start over. It's not like you lose all of your wisdom and experience that you've ever gotten. It
Mm.
just means you're surprised by your finances or you're looking for a new job. But it's not, I hate starting over. It's not a restart. I get to keep everything that the universe has given me up to this point and build on it. But sometimes if people are like, "Hey, why'd you move to Utah?" or "Hey, why'd you switch careers?" and you know in your mind you're like, because it felt like my life fell apart. But instead we're
Yeah.
like, "Oh well, we do the interview. You know, this was my greatest weakness is actually my greatest strength. Whatever. We fudge.
Please say that on stage. You're gonna bring the house down when you say that. I'll be the loudest laugher too.
Oh, please.
No.
You're all invited. And I'm actually editing it down. So now I have to say even less than I intended.
Two
And that's
minutes or more.
it's
Two
it's
minutes or more.
it's so good for me to keep editing because that forces me to get to the backbone. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, like the way that you're talking about things and not starting over, it feels like an iterative process. It's okay, the next go round, the next go round, and what you want to learn from that. You actually haven't. I'm thinking of this ecological model called panarchy, right? And that's the model that we're like, there's like a hill, and then all the wildflowers grow on the hill, and then all of a sudden everything burns down, and then the new wildflowers grow up, and then burns down again, like those sort of natural processes. And this is what's insane, and what I heard you talking about is that there's two phases that happen before the new wildflowers grow, and it's called the remember phase or the revolt phase. And in the remember phase, the ecosystem says, do we want to go and repeat what we just went through? Or it says, do we want to go and revolt against what just happened and totally try something else completely different? This happens millions of times over. It's a very slow process. But like if wildlife and ecosystems can have a revolt and a remembrance phase, so too can we, in terms of us being like, we're not totally restarting. We're just thinking about what we want to remember, and then we were thinking about what we want to revolt against. And that's what I just heard from you, Tiffany, was that, this idea of choosing to not start completely over again. Before we get into the TEDx talk, talk about the emotion. By the way, y'all, if you guys are watching the video of this, she's like blankly looking into my eyes saying, what in the hell is Cordone talking about right now?
No, I'm visualizing it. I was on that hill, I was watching the fire, and I was thinking about the pine cone. There's this one pine cone that can't even grow its seed unless it's been burned. Like that's
Yes.
in its DNA or something.
Yes.
So yeah, I was on that, and I probably looked like I was zoning out, but in the zone. I was definitely in the zone. There was a zone of some kind.
Hey, are you picking up what I'm throwing down here? Are you digging the Joy Revolution podcast? If so, I invite you to subscribe on this platform. Now, if you want more, I have an online community called The Underground. It's free to sign up. In there, you'll find mini courses inspired by podcasts like this one. You get to connect with other community members. I'm in there. The link's in the description. Let's get back to the episode. If y'all are watching this on YouTube, go and put in the comments whether she was zoning out or not. I'm the first one to vote she was zoning out. She's like, get to the talk. It's worth like one more go round to talk about emotions and just how powerful emotions are. And, when you talk about emotions in terms of like GPS, I also have this idea that it feels like these alarms. Like, hey, look, this alarm is going off right now. Your car alarm is going off, right? So it's like, it means that something is coming into, your space that you can be aware of. And so when I hear you talking about that, it does feel like emotions, all of them are to our benefit, not just chasing joy. So when I see the way that you talk about emotions, it's almost like embracing emotional diversity. And so what's your take on the way that emotions show up and how we could go and run with those emotions?
I don't think there's a bad one or a wrong one. I think every emotion is trying to set me free. Somebody once asked me one time or told me one time, they're like, you're an empath. I was like, what is that? So that was an adult before I realized that some people are in tuned to their emotions more.
Yeah.
I think we all have the same amount of emotions, and we have them to the same degree. But some of us perhaps are more left or right brain or whatever it is, we can just sit with them easier or sooner. But I have been blessed every single time. I have actually let myself emote. Sometimes I call it sit in the puddle, and I don't run from it and I don't deny it. There is this kernel of truth that it leads me to, and it was worth it. I wouldn't wish the tears on anybody, but once I didn't let go of the fact that I don't know if it's self-preservation or my inner light or wisdom, like something is trying to be given to me or trying to be birthed or trying to be created. Don't lose that just because I'm crying. Don't lose that just because I'm angry. Follow it. In fact, know that the fact that you're emoting means that there is a truth, there is justice or injustice, there is a bigger idea outside myself. And my emotions are not stupid. They're not immature. They're not, gender or chemical or monthly, now moods are, sure, my body goes through all kind of phases, but I've always been so glad when I followed the emotion to an idea, because the ideas that have come hard earned from sitting in my emotions have been life-changing. And so that's why I'm like, well, as a TEDx, I don't want to just say, don't do this, don't label. You got to do something in its place. Don't just create a vacuum. What are you
Right.
supposed to do? If you're going to stop doing something, start being curious about emotions, start learning about them, start expressing them, and start valuing them. Maybe there's people in my audience who see emotion as a weakness.
Yep.
They've lived in a subculture where emotions weren't logical. I think they're very logical.
Okay.
Yeah, your body is trying to keep you alive. Our heart is beating, our lungs are breathing, we sweat, we digest. To me, emotions are doing the same thing. They are protecting me and prolonging my life.
So what do you say to someone who says, I'm just not an emotional person?
I, inside, I might chuckle a little because if they're not an emotional person, I believe that we express it differently. I get the introvert extrovert thing and stoic, and some people from different cultures are more stoic. But I like I said, I think everyone has emotions. I think Hitler had them. I think Mother Teresa had them, and I think that their emotions caused them to do things in this world.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And sure, they might not, maybe in their mind they're thinking I was doing this because I believed it to be right or I had a goal. But I think there's quite a few of us who don't realize how much the emotions affect our goals. um I think that there are soldiers and there are people who are supposed to be stoics, or there are consultants and there are doctors who would say, oh, well, I know why I made that decision because it was the best decision. But I think that the world, especially based on most current neurological science and the research that we're now able to do in 2024, it's showing that our brain is lighting up. For instance, they did a study that if you get punched in the nose, your brain lights up in the same way that if you get your feelings hurt.
Oh,
Your
wow.
your brain does not know the difference. That's why PTSD, like I don't have to be around the shells, the bomb shells. I can be in my backyard.
It's
And I,
stored. It's still stored. Yeah.
yeah. And I think that's because the brain's trying to protect you, and you have to work through that and say, am I truly in danger? What is it that's still hanging out there that I have to resolve or I have to learn how to deal with? You know, it's not, nothing's a death sentence. Like nothing's the end of the road. Your emotions are like, hey, there's something in you that needs to be addressed. And if we're going to turn to violence or numbing or maybe meltdowns, say, I have a good reason that I'm doing that. I have a good reason. And it even goes back to when I was younger. I was going to be a babysitter. So I got a bunch of books at the library, how to be a babysitter. And one of the things it said about babies was they always have a reason to cry. You don't say they're being colicky or they're being annoying, they're being babies. They always have a reason. And it might be that their clothes are too tight, they're too wet, they're dehydrated, they're scared. But I loved that, yeah, I can honor the emotions of another human being to
Mm.
help them. And I've never lost that. I do that now with my adult coworkers. If I see them crying like a baby, I say they have a reason. And then I do the same thing for myself. When I'm crying like a baby, I'm not beating up on myself or trying to dry my tears because you shouldn't cry. I'm like, I have a good reason. I know I do.
Mm. So we're going to take this on November the 9th to stage. You're going to be coming over from the West Coast, Utah, right? You're going to be
Yep.
coming over to Florida, November the 9th. It's going to be sold out. What are you most excited about when you take that stage and step on the dot?
Their faces. I have been practicing in the car, practicing at all these places, like talking to the trees, just dark, but the payoff will be that person. I didn't know that person was going to be here. That person looks young. That person looks old. There's a label, right? But I'm going to see some diversity. I'm going to see who showed up in this moment, the live moment. It's like jumping out of an airplane. You pay all this money and you go and you jump out of an airplane for those 3 minutes where you're flying through the air. And that's what I'm looking forward to. Those 10 minutes
Yeah.
when I'm surrounded by fellow human beings, and I'm going to see if I can get an idea from my mouth and my mind into their lives, and just let what happens happen. But that live audience
Yeah.
gives me energy. Some people are afraid of public speaking because of that, but I'm like, give me the energy.
Dude, I think you just pulled something out of me. Like you're like part like empath, part warlock. Do you still have cortisol rushes when you take the stage?
Yeah, I've done enough live speaking, because in college I had to do a recital, and I remember there was a countdown. They dimmed the lights, they announced me, and every cell in your body is like, oh, it's go time. What is my name? What is the first word? What am I doing here? And then you go and like you can't, you black out. Like I don't even, I've done speech contests where I'm like, did I forget anything? I was
You just go into the.
yeah,
You forget.
I will have nerves. I know that. I know I'm gonna have to shake them off. I'm gonna have to do some
Yeah.
breathing, and I'm gonna have to try to get that first sentence out. I do have someone on the front row who might cue me if I blank, but the yeah, it's going to be nerves, and I know that to do hard things is scary. That
Yeah.
probably means it's important.
Yep.
And it's not about me. It might look like, oh, she's on the red dot. She's been marketing all these months. It's not about
Nope.
you, because nobody would want to do that to
Nope.
themselves. There's got to be a message that you would die for, literally die for, to get you to speak publicly.
Yeah.
And I'm doing this out of conviction. And I do think that it is my contribution to the world. Like if I died the day after, I'd be like, well, at least
Yeah.
maybe I helped a few people escape some weight and the
Yeah.
burden of labels.
Mm. Is your daughter gonna be there?
Yeah, she's my plus one, and she's going to do the rehearsal, and we're flying on the plane together, and so it talks about her, the talk. She's been my inspiration, my muse. She's also been my beta audience, and she's like, she's told me, Mom, this talk is you
I,
need to
lo- I love it.
stay
And it
humble.
sounds, I was gonna ask, in terms of, you being a coach who's getting coaching from somebody, but it's pretty much what you just said is you are all about the feedback. It's a growth mindset that you have. But is there ever a time where you're just like, oh, wow, like I'm being coached right now and I don't know if that's something I want to take off. I don't know if there's anything I want to delete there.
Oh yeah, I call it killing your darlings. Anytime you have to edit, you're like, oh, but that was a joke. I thought that was funny, or I thought that was brilliant. And they're like, it's not doing anything for me. It's not working. You have to move it out. And so that's why we don't write books. That's why
Yeah.
I'm not writing a book, is because I'm not willing to edit. I would love to write a book, but I'm afraid of editing.
Got it.
Ad infinitum. You're like, and I'll tell you, I'm so sick of the sound of my own voice. Practicing this TEDx, I'm like, I'm over it, so over it, but they're going to hear it for the first time.
Yeah.
I've got to trust that process.
Completely.
Yeah.
I think that one of the first time I did a TED, I just remember coming off a stage and just being like, I blew it. I completely blew it. And my coach was there and she was like, that was their first time hearing it, not their like 400th time hearing it. So like, it's important for you to not like judge the way that you just performed based on the other 500 times that you went and did it.
Yeah,
So
thank you for that.
Manny's tuning in right now.
I
And
mean,
he wants to know if you're going to be wearing the wooden necklace sprayed as copper and gold.
oh, you know what? I've been told by my coach, Cher, I adore her, could not get here without her, that you need a couple different outfits, and they're going to be hooking a microphone, and that dress or that hairdo might
It's
not
going to be
work.
clanking on the mic. Yeah.
So maybe I will wear this. It's all just gonna depend. I do love that it has a contrast, yes,
It looks awesome.
and it's
Yeah.
lightweight. Maybe it's gonna be my lucky item,
Manny
But yeah,
believes in you.
I'll bring this. I'll bring this as one of my outfits. But
Oh, I love it.
you'll have to tune in the day of to see which made the cut. Okay,
See
Manny?
what you just did? See what she just did there, Manny? Manny's coming back and says he wants to play a game with you.
Let's do it. I'm gonna win.
Well, I have to tell you that, or Manny wants to tell you that only one person has won this game.
Oh,
And you're like, yeah. The person who actually won it was Annie from your speaking group from TEDxOcala.
yes.
So
Okay. All right. I'm in good company.
you're in good company, right? So essentially, Manny is going to ask the question. I'll go in because his microphone's not working today. I'm going to go and I'm going to go and tell you what he asked, and then he's going to give you a score on whether you passed or failed based on the answer. It can be a short answer, it can be a long answer. All right. So here's the first question of 5. Manny, Joy smells like
Lemons.
lemon. You can't see this, but this is really what's going down right now. Manny has a picnic basket and he's opening up and it's full of lemons and he's wafting it. Is that the right word? Oh, Manny gave you just a +1 right there. Congratulations. You're already ahead of where Annie was last time, right?
Ooh, yeah.
Okay. +1. Okay. Next question. Joy tastes like
Your mama's home cooking.
To me, Manny was Filipino, but he's opening on the other side of the picnic basket. He's opening it up, and it's a shepherd's pie, Filipino style.
Ooh, yeah. Mmm, still warm.
Right? He's just lapping it up right now, but another point for you. You're further ahead of everyone who's ever taken this test, right? Okay. Don't screw this up. Joy sounds like
A chorus of human voices singing in harmony and melody.
a chorus of so the a cappella band Pentatonics just showed up.
Did it come out of the picnic basket?
Out of the picnic basket. Like this rainbow came out and they slid off of it. Pentatonics is there.
I love your Christmas music, Pentatonic.
I'm just doing what Manny's doing. He's clapping right now.
Bravo.
He's very excited.
Encore.
Okay, you're blowing this game out of the water. Okay, the next one. Joy looks like
Smiling at myself in the mirror.
I have no idea why he did this, but he's wearing a button-down shirt and he ripped it off. and he's got his hands down and he's looking into a mirror.
Okay.
And the mirror cracked.
Oh.
The mirror cracked.
Yeah, the mirror can't handle such greatness. We all have reasons for why we smile at the mirror. We all have our own reasons.
He said -1,000 for trying to kiss his ass. -1,000. Into the last question. You are -997.
That's
points.
a lot of math. That's big math.
That's big math. Yeah, take a swig. Okay. For all the marbles, -997. Joy feels like
87 emotions.
Manny is putting his button-down shirt back on. He is looking into the broken mirror, which is exactly 87 shards, which shows a different side of Manny. Manny just gave you 998 points.
Did I win or did Annie win? Who's winning here?
You won by 1 point. He gave you 998 points. Defeated. He's doing this right now. Never saw him rip his shirt open before. That's a new time. That's a new low. Okay, sister. Number 1, you're coming back on the show. This is just so much fun that I'm having with you. My company is called The Joy Revolution. And it's meant to do that for a bunch of reasons, but just the big overview is I have a feeling that at some points in your life you're just tapped in and like the heart overfloweth with joy, and it's just like, oh my God, I'm so moved by just everything that's going on, right? That's an internal joy revolution, right? Also at the same time, I firmly believe that joy can be used as a leadership tool, one that's contagious, one that folks just pick up on and they want to create and they want to change history for the better. So, Tiffany, What is your joy revolution?
It's when I have the privilege of learning about someone else's values. I'm learning and they are expressing their values. And I could do that for the rest of my life. I could do that with strangers that I just met, with people that I live with that I've known for a long time. But learning about what causes others to be uplifted, it's so satisfying. It just calm and peace and joy, because either I'll learn about the struggle that they survived, and often it's the struggle that they survived that inspires me to have enough energy perhaps to help them more or support them more, or be their friend. So learning about other people's values, and there's so much to learn. There's so many people to meet, and there's so many wonderful values to have. I'm curious.
I love it. I can't wait to go and see you on stage November the 9th. TEDxOcala. You're going to want to get, there's a couple tickets left that I know of, but this thing's going to sell out. And if you're not in the area, you can go to TEDxOcala.com and pick up an e-ticket. On behalf of Manny and Tiffany and myself, I just wanted to say, start your revolution. Start it in love, in light, in shadows, and enjoy, baby.
What you said.
You said what you said. All right, this wraps up another episode of the Joy Revolution podcast. Thank you so much for listening. And since you made it this far, go ahead and hit subscribe. Now, if you want to hear more podcasts, or if you're ready to engage with a community who will support and challenge you, if you're ready to start your own joy revolution, head on over to my online community, The Underground. The link is in the description. It's free to sign up. I've got a bunch of resources in there, including my own Joy Revolution course. So until next time, I'm Mark Cordone Creative. Dig deep, and I'll see you in the underground.